like scary movies?
Uh-huh. I'm getting ready to watch a video.
You making popcorn?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hi everybody, I'm George, and this is the best little horror house in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made, according to our guest at least. And today's guest is the editor of the anthology series Vacuum Decay, plus the excellent artist behind such comics as Night Cruising and the recent Shadows over Springfield. Please welcome Harry Nordlinger. How you doing, dude?
Not bad at all. Thank you for having me. What an intro.
Yes, happy to do it. I'm a big fan of your work. You know, I really enjoyed Night Cruising, which was my first exposure to it. And then went backwards, read some Vacuum Decay, and then turned out I was getting in right at the right time to watch Shadows over Springfield come out as it was happening. So
hell yeah.
Really, really cool stuff. I'm really stoked to have you on the show, man.
Thanks so much, bro. Really appreciate it.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with horror? Because it's obviously baked into every stitch of your work.
So this will make a lot of sense with what we talk about in a little bit. But I was a really scared kid. I've had a horrible insomnia my whole life. So when I was like 5, 6, the whole family would go to sleep and the house would go dark and I couldn't sleep. I would just be lying awake at night and I would think that I saw things in the darkness and noises outside, and I would just kind of be in my own head with all this like imaginative terror that was consuming me. So I would often, sneak out and go watch TV to cheer myself up or go into my parents' room. I just was a very scared kid. But I was always curious. Like when we would go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video back in the day, I would never rent horror movies, but I'd always go look at the covers look at the images on the back, because I was interested in what horror was, but then I would see something that was too scary and then I would dream or think about it the next couple nights.
Of course. I
remember seeing the cover to Death Beach or Bloody Beach where the woman is like getting sucked into the sand. That really fucked me up when I was like 5, and so like it was always something that I was interested in, but it was too much for me. Then around like probably 10 or 11. I'd seen a few scary movies here and there. I remember seeing Signs in theaters when I was like 9. Which that's not like an overt horror movie, but it's, and then I think around 10, 11, I finally was like, you know what? Like, let's watch some horror movies. And I watched Resident Evil, which in retrospect is not a good movie, but I loved it when I was 10.
It's fun, though. I mean, especially at that age, you're the exact right time for it.
No, exactly. And it was like genuinely creepy enough. And then from there, I actually got into real horror movies, and I watched, all the classics, Dawn of the Dead, The Shining, Texas Chainsaw, and it was like off to the races at that moment. And just like something about it just completely captivated me. And by the age of like 13, I was like a weird horror nerd. I remember my MySpace page was covered in horror GIFs, back when, you'd put like GIFs embedded in your page. Yeah. And I literally started making horror comics around the same age.
You got Jason begging to be in your top 8. Freddy's I'm in there,
think I
dude.
Literally changed my top 8 to be like Ed Gein and Leatherface, because like it was you do gimmicky top 8s, and at that point I was more into like gore and monsters, and then as I got older and matured, I became way more interested in tone and atmosphere. I think I remember seeing Cure. Well, I always loved David Lynch, which is big for that, and Hitchcock, but I remember seeing Cure, the Kiyoshi Kurosawa movie, when I was like 18 and being so amazed by it. And amazed by how much it does with such little visuals. And it was something where I was like, oh my God, like you can really do a lot with atmosphere.
Yeah, that movie is really like unreal. I mean, when people ask me like what is one of the movies that was introduced to you to the show that you actually like think is among the best, that is like one of the best movies that I hadn't seen before somebody was like, this is my pick, and it fucking blew me away.
It's incredible. It's unlike anything else. And all of his, that's his masterpiece, but he's got a lot of great. I just watched Chime like 2 nights ago, his new movie, which is kind of like a sequel to Cure. But at the same time, I got into this guy, Philippe Grandrieux, who's a French video art filmmaker, and he had a lot of films that were... So I got really into... Begotten, I saw at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So I got really into... I shifted from being into gore monster exploitation into being into, like, the art house atmosphere stuff. I still love gore horror exploitation, but the atmospheric stuff stuck with me more.
Well, Begotten's the perfect middle Venn diagram of those two things.
Yeah, it's as gory and as atmospheric as can be.
Well, the movie we're talking about today definitely deals in that, and then some. It is a viral hit and much more. It is the Kyle Edward Ball written, directed, and edited experiment in childhood terror, Skinamarink. Really, really wild movie. It is exciting. It is controversial. It's divisive. This is just such a fun pick. And even before we get into like what makes it the best, I'm interested in hearing like how you experienced this movie for the first time.
I, over the summer, saw the poster. The summer before it came out, so 2022. Somebody posted the poster and they were like, this is my most anticipated movie of the year. And I just loved the grainy, like lo-fi vibe. This is at the peak of analog horror, which is kind of a movement that I think is over now. I kind of think Skinamarink ended it. And analog horror and liminal space, both very trending in horror online circles. So I love that image. And then after a couple of weeks, and I love the description, which is just two children wake up and they can't find their father and the doors and windows are gone. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Then about a couple of weeks later, the trailer comes out. And I remember I even posted this. I said, this might be the greatest trailer I've ever seen. and I made a short Vacuum Decay trailer inspired by the Skinamarink trailer. The thing that the trailer did was it recreates the imagery, this like kind of lo-fi grainy film imagery, and these really dark rooms that are only lit by a single source, usually a TV. But then also the way the audio was recorded, where it's little children's voices whispering and talking, but they're meant to sound, all the audio, I don't know how it was actually recorded, but it's meant to sound like it's coming out of a kid's tape recorder. So all the audio is this warbly low tape recorded audio. And it just really brought me back to the whole childhood being up at night scared. It like immediately just watching the trailer, I was like, oh, all of that's coming back to me. And then a few months later, my friend sent me a link to watch the movie. And I remember I watched it the night after Thanksgiving.
You're all tryptophammed up still. You're ripe for terror.
It was the day before this comic convention, and I went to the convention, and it was completely dead. Like, no one showed up, but the whole day I was just thinking about Skinamarink.
Wow. Well, it certainly is the kind of thing that sticks with you, you know? It really... I've been doing the same thing where... like I said, I've watched it a few times over the last couple of days because, one, it's not really the kind of movie that, like, lends itself to note-taking in terms of, like, being able to still enjoy the movie as it's meant to be.
Right.
Which, you know, it happens sometimes. And so I usually, with that, wind up doing just, like, another watch-through on its own without taking notes. And then there was a commentary track for this as well. And still, I'm like... I don't have everything figured out. I'm sitting here thinking about like what everything could possibly mean. There's the great ambiguity to it. And I think that is what gives it those legs is that it doesn't just spoon feed you answers. It does deal a lot in tone and atmosphere and things that aren't necessarily like, here's a clear cut point A to point B plot. There is a plot and you can follow it, but it's also like not everything fits perfectly in a way that creates that terror.
It's almost more of an experimental art film than it is a horror movie. It's very much like a video art piece.
Yeah.
So when I watched it, I literally was like, I don't get scared anymore. You know, I'm 31. I've been watching horror movies and into horror my whole life. I don't get scared anymore. But that was the first moment that I was like, oh, I'm like, the movie ended. And I was like, that was amazing. And then my girlfriend was asleep and I was just walking around the house and I was like, I'm scared in my house alone right now. And so then I watched it the very next night. I watched it 2 nights in a row. And I watched the short film Heck, that's like the proof of concept, which is also incredible. And it was literally all I thought about for 2 months. For 2 straight months, I only thought about Skinamarink. So I then got my girlfriend and my brother to come over, and we all watched it together. And then this is from November to January. And at some point, every day during those 2 months, I would think about Skinamarink, and I would get, like, actively depressed. It would, like... It's something that just upset me so deeply. And it's not just because of the movie's scary. It's also the implications of the movie are as horrifying as anything could ever be. Like, I mean, we'll get into spoilers later, I assume. But what actually happens, if you follow the movie literally, what actually happens is possibly the darkest thing that a person could imagine.
It's very fucked up.
And then by the third time I watched it, I understood... Because the first time I watched it, I'm like, this is imagery and tone and vibes. And there is a thing happening, but most of it is imagery. The third to the fourth time I watched it, I'm like, oh, this is a very clear-cut structure.
Right.
You can follow everything that happens. The things that happen are feet walking across rooms and light going across the ceiling.
Right.
but you can see where you're like, oh, now we're in the basement. Okay, now we're upstairs. Okay, this person's talking. Okay, this person left the room. Like, you can really understand the literal what is happening the more you consume it.
Yes, exactly. The literal, you understand the literal pieces of it, which then frees you up to sort of be chewing on the less literal subtextual pieces of it as well.
Yeah. And then it came out in theaters, and I finally went alone to watch it in theaters. And I was like nervous to do so. I was like literally anxious to go see it. And when I saw it in theaters in January, I was like, all right, I finally feel like I can stop. I can stop my 2-month Skinamarink obsession. I can like get over it.
You've exercised.
And obviously, I'm still not over it, but I could move on from it.
Sure, it's no longer haunting you in the same way.
Yeah.
Well, Ball himself is a Canadian filmmaker who was sort of following the make something and jobs will follow ethos. After film school, he moved to YouTube, creating shorts based on solicited nightmare stories, appropriately called bite-sized nightmares, and one kept popping up. He said, quote, "People kept commenting on my videos with the exact same dream they had. I'm between the ages of 6 and 10, I'm at my house, my parents are either dead or missing, and there's a monster. Around that age is when we're first having to deal with the world without our parents' help, in a very powerful way. That's probably why the dream keeps coming up in people. It's a common intrinsic part of humanity. Everyone, I think, has versions of this dream. And I think that there is a relatability to the nightmare aspect of it, a simplicity that lets you sort of project your own stuff onto it in a way that is really effective for the movie."
Yeah, I felt like he'd looked into my subconscious. I was like, not only has he seen my childhood fears and created them, he also ate my lunch in the sense that he did perfectly what I've been trying to do with horror comics for so long.
Right.
Like, he perfectly encapsulated the horror of an empty room and a dark hallway. But I thought it was like I was like, I had a scared childhood. I had insomnia. I would watch old cartoons to keep myself up. I had VHSs of classic cartoons. Like, everything about that, I just felt so personal. And then when the movie came out and it was a huge hit, and all these people had the same exact reaction to me, I'm like, oh, this is way more of a universal experience than I thought. Like, this is something that so many people can relate to. And a bunch of people were like, it's boring, I don't get it. And it's like, all right, well, you might have had just like a chill childhood then. I don't know. Maybe like you weren't fucked up like other people were. But I get it I get it more than I've gotten almost any other piece of art.
It's so funny you mention that because I say this with all the affection in the world. This is something that I really like about the commentary, but a significant portion of it is Kyle like calling out specific reviews and being like, "You didn't get it, dumbass."
Dude, the best movies that are coming out right now are movies that have I don't care about Rotten Tomatoes or any review sites, but Rotten Tomatoes, if it has a high critic score, low audience score, that means it's probably a fantastic movie.
Yeah, definitely at least worth checking out.
Yeah.
Kyle also, going into this, kept in mind the phrase, "scary fades, but creepy is forever," which is his take on a Judge Judy quote about beauty fading, but dumb is forever. Classic Judge Judy. The verdicts are final, and the verdict is, creepy is forever. So.
Well, the other thing about that is, so I never like jump scares. I always think, well, maybe, not never, but growing up in the 2000s, every horror movie that came out was some dumbass jump scare bullshit.
A glut.
And it was really cheap, and it got really old. This movie does jump scares in a way that they're not... The shock of the jump is not the point. The point is that you know it can happen, and every quiet moment, every long take, every long drawn-out sequence, you're like, I'm aware that I could be shocked at any moment. So the fact that the jump scares do happen creates a creep towards them potentially happening again, and you're always on edge.
Absolutely, and just structurally, I mean, you, as an audience member, cannot maintain that terror the entire time. So there has to be a catharsis point where you have, like, a moment of release so that the dread can start to build up again. So, like, literally just, it's an unsustainable thing to just do tone the entire time. So I think that he deployed the jump scares really, really effectively in a way that didn't overplay them, which I think is, to your point.
Yeah.
But also just like when he used them, they are fucking scary. Like, they are good.
They're horrifying. The other thing is those moments, those quiet moments, the like peaceful moments, there's something so disturbing to me about people trying to avoid facing horror. Mm-hmm. So like the idea of these kids are aware that they're in this nightmare scenario, but they just keep playing with Legos and watching cartoons because they're trying to distract themselves and they're trying to cheer themselves up.
Right.
There's also the McPherson tape, the alien abduction. It's not, the aliens are cheap, it's not great, but there's a part in that I love where they see the aliens and they're scared and then they go back to having the kid's birthday party.
Right.
And they're all pretending that everything's normal. And that is so disturbing to me. Like people who have been traumatized and horrified just trying to be normal for a moment.
Yeah.
And there's a part near the end where the kid says, "Can we watch something happy?" Which to me is maybe the most devastating line in horror movie history.
Yeah, it's so devastating. And I think you're absolutely right that it is really that rejection of it where you're like, I literally cannot handle this, so I'm not going to, is so powerful. Kyle expanded on this, saying, I always use the example of The Exorcist versus The Shining. When The Exorcist came out, it was scary. It made you jump out of your skin, and I still think of it as a masterpiece. But it's not as scary because it's been cannibalized. People immediately took from it and took the scare aspects of it and applied it to other movies. But The Shining is different. It isn't really scary. It doesn't make you jump out of your skin, but it's creepy. It gets under your skin. And creepy you can't get rid of. And I think that that is part of, again, what makes the movie stick with you, is that it is the quiet moments where you're like, oh, I'm sitting here in my room and it's quiet. Who knows what's going to fucking happen?
Which is how I felt during that 2-month period where I was obsessed with Skinamarink. I would be in my house alone, and I'm never scared. And all of a sudden, like, I have to turn the lights on. And there's the second time I watched it alone in my living room, and my girlfriend was in bed, like, doing the laundry or whatever. And I was like, all right, she's awake. I'm not home alone. And then when the movie ended, I realized she'd been asleep the whole time. And I was like, oh my God, I was alone the whole time. Yeah, it really does that well. And it's also funny, but that you said Exorcist has been, or he said Exorcist has been cannibalized, because a bunch of YouTube people and TikTok people have started ripping off Skinamarink and doing, like, adding Skinamarink aesthetics to their, and none of it will undo what Skinamarink did, and none of it will cheapen Skinamarink, but it is funny that he has also had that influence.
Yeah.
Already.
But he does recreate this story with what is essentially a 30-minute proof of concept called Heck, as you mentioned. He used this to then crowdsource the $15,000 budget of the feature-length Skinamarink. There were several steps taken to keep the budget low, including borrowing equipment from the Film and Video Art Society of Alberta and shooting at his parents' Edmonton home with a small crew over just a week. And the budget limitations, as they often do, helped to shape the thing. They required a lot of atypical camera angles and trick photography to simulate the child perspective that we're embodying, but there were also some self-imposed rules that Kyle Edward Ball established. Quote, I set rules in place that I wasn't allowed to break. We never see someone's face. We always avoided showing people on screen for too long. Whatever dialogue is always delivered off screen. We never leave the house, even if at the beginning you see windows and doors in the house, the blinds are always shut, so we never get a view of the outside world. There's also no music in the movie outside the diegetic. I set these rules in place before I even got the script going, just so that I would have a foundation to build on, and I actually found it freeing to be working within a set framework. To that point, as far as screen time goes, there's only 10 minutes and 15 seconds of people on screen out of the 100 minutes of movie. The mom has the most screen time, even though she has the least amount of lines.
The back of her head.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you can relate to this at all, this feeling of, like, the constraints of indie comics having to fuel your work and sort of the shape that it takes. And is that part of your connection to the movie, do you think?
Well, the constraints aspect is interesting because, well, first off, the no faces and no dialogue is part of what makes the movie so alienating.
Yeah.
It's one of the least... It does everything it can to never comfort you. Seeing people's faces, seeing mouths moving in dialogue, that's something we're familiar with. And therefore it's comforting. Even in the perspective of horror, a human face is still a comforting thing. So to completely eliminate that is so alienating and dehumanizing. The constraints thing is fascinating because it's very reminiscent of Dogma 95.
That's right. I was thinking that as
Lars
well.
von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg's movement about self-constraint. Constraint is, I think, one of the most important aspects to art. I think people, artists specifically, can't control themselves to a degree. And you'll see this with filmmakers. There are masters who can do amazing things with endless budgets, like Scorsese or whatever. But a lot of filmmakers fall apart when they get big budgets. Richard Kelly is a big example, where he made Donnie Darko for no money, and it's a cult classic. And then they gave him, like, whatever, $50 million and he made Southland Tales. Like, people are too indulgent without limitations. Now, obviously, a $15,000 movie has its own limitations. A comic that I'm drawing myself has significant limitations, especially because I'm not an amazing artist, so I can only draw what I can draw. But self-imposed limitations are really fascinating, and there's something I consider. And I'm trying to think. I did a comic called Yawning, which was a 20-page comic about my own insomnia. It was like the closest to like personal. And I made a few rules for myself. And one of them was nothing in motion. Everything, like, you know, motion lines or motion blurs that you draw in comics. I was like, everything is still, because I want it to look like still frames. And then at the end, you break that for this big, like, action scene.
Sure.
But I think self-imposed limitations are sometimes, like, the most important thing you can do. I think it's a really self-conscious thing for an artist to do, is to limit themselves. I did another comic for Vacuum Decay, and this was purely ripped off from Skinamarink, where I did all the faces are blacked out in shadows. So there's a lot of characters, but you never see their eyes. Stuff like that. I think giving yourself self-imposed limitations before you begin making artwork is a very good practice, and something that everyone should at least try.
I totally agree, and I think that what Kyle specifically is reacting to is this sort of idea of, if you're making something that's so experimental that you can release yourself from the sort of financial burden of, like, I need to make money on this thing. Like, it releases you from that albatross of commercialism in a way that lets him explore a little more creatively. And if it doesn't pan out, well, that's the way the cookie fucking crumbles, I guess, sometimes. It's also
Skinamarink proves two things. It proves that the idea that every idea has been done is bullshit, and is always bullshit. Skinamarink comes out and it is completely unlike anything else that has come before it. There are moments that you can pinpoint as being like, oh, that's like, you know, Cocteau, and that's like David Lynch. But as a whole, it is unlike anything else. It also proves that artists don't need, if you're truly creative and inventive, a budget is just a tool. Like, you can actually make perfect art with as little tools as possible. Did you see Hundreds of Beavers?
Yes, really, really great.
I fucking loved Hundreds of Beavers. Hundreds of Beavers, to me, was the comedy version of Skinamarink, where it's like very creative people with very little access to equipment and money, putting every single thing they have on screen, and having a smart and interesting enough idea and concept and filmmaking creativity that they make it work really well.
Yeah.
I don't know I think Hundreds of Beavers is probably a little bit more expensive than Skinamarink, but it still is very...
It's also longer, though.
Yeah.
But I think that makes a lot of sense, and I also find that they're an interesting comparison in terms of they have a lot of similarities, and also they are sort of opposite on certain ends of the spectrum in like a yin-yang sort of way, where Hundreds of Beavers is really, really leveraging our shared visual language of cartoons and video games, and Skinamarink is really deliberately subverting our established filmic language. And so they both use those to carry us along and create certain emotions in us that help to keep the movie going in a way that I think is absolutely fighting above their weight class.
Yeah.
It's just great stuff.
Yeah, it's also... Skinamarink does use... the language of cinema is fully subverted. It is completely a different style of filmmaking and cinematography, and audio especially. But then it does use familiar imagery in a twisted way to create the uncanny. The Barbie floating on the ceiling, stuffed animals on the walls, the Legos, those familiar cartoons and those familiar sounds. The cartoon music getting warbled and chaotic as
stretching
you
out,
zoom down the hallway. Like, that stuff is so horrifying, specifically when it reminds you of your childhood memories and it warps your childhood memories into a nightmare.
Absolutely. There's another interesting quote from Kyle where he said, "The great thing about making an experimental movie is that you're shooting in the dark, but you're also having fun playing. Doing something experimental can be so rewarding, as risky as it may be. Playing with perspective, tricking people and yourself, people like that. Audiences are smarter than people give them credit for. Sometimes people in the film industry, whether directors, distributors, or even other audience members, look at other moviegoers as idiotic, unwashed masses, and that's not the case at all. I made a movie that I would want to go out and see, and you'd be surprised by just how often that aligns with the general public. My mom is not big into experimental movies, not particularly risky with her viewing habits, but she loves Twin Peaks. When that came out, people responded, finally, something that's not talking down to me. Also, just because someone doesn't like your weird experimental movie, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to respond to another weird experimental movie. And I think that that feeling of playfulness, of experimentation, putting that into an experimental film is what makes this so interesting and have such a almost like devious glee to it. You know, the fact that it is so twisted at the end is like part of that impishness that I feel like permeates the movie.
It's also incredibly ballsy to like
Kyle Edward ballsy even.
No, quite literally. It's like, and it did hit. That's the thing. This is a perfect example. When you make something that is a pure expression of your artistic vision, maybe your artistic vision does suck and no one wants it, but if you're a good artist, it will often find an audience. Things like Rise of the Skywalker, for example, where a committee tries to please everyone, the general public sees that for what it is.
Right.
And we go, this sucks. No one wants this. Like, there are people that are unwashed masses who gobble up whatever Marvel shit you put in front of them. But there's a huge portion of people who are willing to take a chance. And that comes to the fact that I showed Skinamarink at the movie theater that I work at, the Balboa Theater in San Francisco, for anybody in the Bay Area. I was pushing for it for a long time. I showed it. A bunch of people came out. A bunch of teenagers came out. And I did an intro before, and I asked how many people in this audience have seen Skinamarink before. And only like 4 people raised their hands out of the like 50 or so that came. So I was like, oh, that's great. And then we watched the movie, and I was fully expecting walkouts. And no one walked out. And at the end, all these kids came out, and I was like, what'd you guys think? And they were like, we loved it. And I was like, oh, shit, all right. Fuck yeah, dude. And it's also fun that other people love Skinamarink, but love it for the completely opposite reason that I love it. Like, people come out, people think it's fun. Like, people literally are like, oh, it's a fun, cool horror movie. And I'm like, this is the least fun thing I've ever seen in my life. This is, like, painful for me to watch.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it sort of rides that line in such a fascinating way, and not to jump too far ahead, is part of what makes this the best horror movie ever made, because it has that, like I said, to me, a sense of impish glee, in a delight in making us feel that pain. Say, yeah, now you share this with me. But Lynch is, as Kyle is unashamed to admit, one of his teenage heroes. You know, he referenced Twin Peaks there. It's also, the experimentation is there as a shared link. Eraserhead, there's a ton of that in this. The surreal floating feeling of some of his later work as well, like Inland Empire, definitely comes across in this. And one element of that is the shot perspective. And Kyle said, consciously, almost every shot is from kid height, which isn't something I came up with. Spielberg forever had that rule, and even before him, I think Ozu had a rule. In Tokyo Story, the camera never goes higher than 3 feet off the ground, the same height as someone kneeling on a mat.
Oh.
And I think that what really helps this movie and the cinematography is the fact that their director of photography, Jamie McRae, is an experimental filmmaker in his own right. He is not usually working on other people's movies, but he and Kyle Edward Ball went to film school together. They really clicked. They worked on a lot of projects together, even without being assigned to. And I think having someone who is so self-assured in their own work as well, being able to sort of not take a back seat, but work in a support role, can be really, really useful, especially in something experimental like this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I noticed that with Skinamarink, obviously, it's all shot from, it's predominantly POV. A huge portion of the movie is from the kid's actual POV perspective, and then the rest of it is, from kids' points of view, close-ups, and looking up. I didn't know that about Tokyo Story, though. That's fascinating. And next time I watch that, I'll think of that. And Spielberg, E.T., of course, is what you're referencing there. Yeah, that is an interesting thing. I didn't realize that had like a tradition throughout history, throughout cinema.
That's right. They did shoot this movie digitally at a high ISO and low light, then went really hard in post-production with a lot of intense grading and artificial analog grain distortion. Kyle said, I purchased a package of film grain overlays a while back. I think they were Super 16mm. And when I got to editing, I picked different overlays, graded and played with the levels shot by shot, and I just did that until it looked right and read well. It wasn't just one overlay I looped 100 times. I took my time to make sure that there were enough varieties so that you didn't subconsciously say, oh, I've seen this overlay before. That is an insane amount of work. It does come across because, I mean, it is so unsettling. You see almost faces emerging in the warping. It is a whole level of this movie is just like how upsetting the grain of it is.
It's a true, like, the texture makes it. Did you ever see the movie Blow Up by Antonioni? It's amazing, but it's a guy captures a photo and he thinks that he might have captured a murder in the photo, and he keeps blowing the photo up and blowing the photo up, and eventually it becomes an abstract field of color blobs because he's blown it up so much, and you can't see anything in it. And I remember thinking that with this movie, where like the texture is so heavy and it works with the light and shadow so much that you can kind of see anything. You can like look into this long hallways and your mind can put whatever you want in there. The part where the kid looks under the bed and you don't know if there's anything under the bed. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Kyle Edward Ball did say that there is one, because people kept asking him, like, is there a person in this scene? Is there a face in this shot? And he said there's at least one shot with a hidden face that you might not see. And I've kept an eye out for it. And I can't tell because every shot there could be.
Right. And this did take forever, this editing process. A full 20% of it was color grading and applying the grain. But it was very important not only from simply an aesthetic of scares, but also the surreality. They asked Kyle in Filmmaker magazine, Skinamarink is presented as taking place in 1995, but the artificial film grain evokes the 70s. Meanwhile, the archival public domain cartoons you implement are largely from before the 50s. Then there's the inexplicable time jump. How did the distortion of time factor into your telling of the story? And he responded, from the beginning, I wanted to do a movie that looked and felt like something from the 70s, but in my mind, I wanted the movie to take place in 1995. And for a while, I thought, how do I compromise these things or make that work? And at some point I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to do it. I know it's a contradiction, but I think it works. Who says you can't do this? So the short answer of why I said a movie in 1995 but made it look like the 70s is just because I wanted to. I think people should do things that are counterintuitive if they think it can work. And as far as the old cartoons, we obviously had to have stuff like that because it's all public domain. We couldn't let them watch The Lion King, which probably would have been more appropriate, because that's what I watched a billion times at that age. I do remember that we did have a little bargain bin VHS tape that had a bunch of public domain cartoons on it that we would watch from time to time. All of the ones I remember appear in the film. There's a Cinderella-ish story that was, oddly enough, made by General Motors, where they made her a carriage. Then there's one called Somewhere in Dreamland by Max Fleischer, which I milked the hell out of because it's about a little boy and a little girl who have a dream. In reality, we as kids in 1995 would have been watching The Lion King, or maybe even older stuff like Pinocchio. We would have watched Homeward Bound too, but it's kind of a nice restraint that we can only play these old public cartoons because they're sentimental and creepy and weird. And so I think that to sum that up, I think it's so valuable to just go with your instinct on some of these things and let the incongruities work as part of the thing. Like the fact that it has these clashing styles makes you feel uncomfortable and is a benefit to the movie, not a detriment.
No, it's kind of the entire aesthetic of it working perfectly in tandem. I think that the mixture of time, my brother and I talked about this for a long time recently, the mixture of time periods is a general feeling of nostalgia. It generally evokes nostalgia. I am lucky, and I think this movie hits especially hard for millennials. I was 3 years old, 3 and 4 in 1995. So literally what I was talking about when I would stay up late being scared of the shadows, that could have been the same year that this movie takes place.
Right, Kevin is 4.
Yeah, and it's literally my age, maybe a year older. The film grain 70s and the cartoons of the 50s, it's a general feeling of the past. It's a general feeling of this is a time forgotten, a time long ago. Also, that Dreamland cartoon, I literally had on a VHS of public domain cartoons. And that song, to me, is the theme of the movie. It plays twice. It plays at the very end. And that really sums up the whole vibe of the film to me.
That's right.
This old-timey choir singing about children having a dream.
See you somewhere in dreamland.
My girlfriend is so annoyed because I was singing that song for months. It was just stuck in my brain. That and I'm a fuzzy grizzly bear, which is like, that's the scariest scene in the movie to me, is the grizzly bear song with the long hallway. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I love that feeling of generalized nostalgia. I think it's really effective. Definitely
is. Also, I'm just glad that we got a little shout out to the Fleischers in this, some of the goats. So
I know there's a Bimbo's Initiation shows up in there.
That's right. That's right. The sound was 99% done in post-production as well, handled by assistant director Joshua Buchhalter. A lot of hissing, a lot of hums, and Kyle said, quote, "I didn't just want Skinamarink to look like an old movie, I wanted it to feel and sound like one. I wanted to go really hard with that. I didn't just want to make the dialogue sound like it was recorded on an old microphone. I wanted the audio to feel like an old, scratched-up retaping of a film that wasn't preserved from the 70s. I had so much fun playing with that because I discovered in different scenes and different cuts, I could use the hiss and hum to my advantage and tell a story even with that." And yeah, absolutely, the fact that there is a moment towards the end where that drops out and it's a moment of actual silence. We'll talk about it when it comes up because it's insanely effective, but it is part of the storytelling to have this weird format warping thing that, you know, is a stylistic choice that then helps to shape the way it turns out.
There's also a part where the hum becomes incredibly loud and overtakes the entire audio track. Yeah, the sounds are a character almost all their own because, again, you hear things, you hear whispers, you hear voices, and sometimes they blend in and out of the track. The sound of the tape clicking between scenes is really incredible and unsettling. A scene will end and you'll hear them like hit the stop recording, or it's like what it sounds like is the stop recording button. Because there's the format of they have their little toy microphone recorder and all the sounds like it's coming through that.
Yeah.
And them hitting the stop and record. The aesthetics of this movie are so fucking me. Like everything about the way this movie looks and sounds hits me right where it's supposed to. The opening credits over the long shot with the kids in the tape, just like, that's my fucking shit, dude.
Oh, yeah. Sadly, Joshua died shortly after wrapping, and the audio was still on his computer, which presented two problems. Kyle discussed this difficult time saying, "Number one, I'm mourning the loss of my friend. Number two, I didn't just want to lose that audio. I could have easily redone it, but I really wanted to keep that audio explicitly because Josh recorded it. And after he died, I had to provide enough time in between him passing away and his family having time to process it. But in the same vein, not long enough that it's like, well, are they just going to delete everything on his computer? So I waited a bit, and I was able to get a hold of his family, and they were more than understanding and accommodating in the circumstances of everything. Which is why, in the movie, on top of being in memory of Joshua Buchhalter, there's a credit saying we would like to express our sincerest thanks to the family of Joshua Buchhalter. Without their kindness and understanding, Skinamarink would not have been completed. So, really, like, a tragic hiccup in this movie, but, you know, it's a nice, like, homage to him that he was like, no, we're gonna make sure that, like, even though this is ADR sound, that it's gonna be his, like, a sort of remembrance that he can live on in this movie.
So that credit is at the very beginning of the film, and I didn't know, so this is the first time I'm hearing the full story about it. I assumed that I didn't know that he got the audio off his computer, but that always added another layer to the movie, where it's like, this film is what it is. It's this piece of art that evokes these things, but also there's a real life person who really worked on it and really died, and it is dedicated to them and their family, and that kind of makes it feel more important, almost in a certain way. That's interesting to actually know what happened there, because he doesn't say it outright, and I didn't want to ask. Yeah,
it doesn't feel cast off. Like it would be. A lot of people dismiss experimental film in a way that is very, very foolish of them. But I think that when you see that kind of thing at the beginning, it does sort of like establish a foundation of like, this isn't something that someone didn't think about. Like, people did work on this and put their blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Yeah, and it shows. Every moment of that film is perfectly, meticulously crafted.
Yeah.
There's only one flaw, which we can maybe talk about later.
Well, thankfully, it was completed, and it premiered at Fantasia to great reception, which persisted to other festivals. But while still getting the hang of the at-home festivals that COVID precipitated, a technical issue let the movie wind up online, which then circulated and went viral on social media for a few reasons. First off, it's very scary, which helps. And then second of all, it also lends itself to fan theories, which the internet loves, and we'll have plenty of time to discuss the various theories towards the end. But Kyle said, "I've been honest about the whole post-piracy blow-up, and I find that that's the best policy. I'm not happy that it got leaked. Having it get pirated in the beginning was a nightmare, and it caused conflicted emotions in me. Lots of people at Shudder and IFC had to work around the clock to move timelines up and change the release date, but When someone sees my movie, whether it's in a theater or streaming on Shudder or they pirated it and they love it, I can't help but be happy that they loved it, right? In a nutshell, that's how I feel. Am I happy the movie got leaked? No. Am I happy that it blew up as a result of the leak? Well, maybe a little. Am I happy other people who wouldn't have necessarily seen my movie love my movie? Yes, I am happy about that. I do think that that is a very, well-measured response to this. I can understand it feeling pretty devastating to have that slip from your fingertips at the last second, but as he said, how many people wouldn't have seen it otherwise, watched it, and then went to go see it on the theatrical release because they had been like, oh, this rocked, I want to go, A, support it, B, see it in its highest quality.
So I watched the leaked version 3 times, and I even messaged Kyle and was like, I love your movie, blah, blah. I was under the impression that he had leaked it himself to drum up publicity for it. I didn't realize till later that it had been leaked, and then I felt really bad about it. I always was intending to support it after I saw it the first time because I loved it so much. But then when it finally did, and also I don't know, I'm sure it was horrible for him, but I think in retrospect, it was probably good for the movie that it got leaked, because when it actually came out, there was no marketing budget for this movie.
Right.
People wouldn't have known that it was happening. So when it came out 3 or 4 months after the leak, there were thousands of people who were eager to see it and had been heard about it online. So I went and saw it in theaters because I had to, for my own sense of closure. And I wanted to support it. I also made sure to stream it on Shudder multiple times. I watched it on Shudder, but then I also just played it and left it on in the background because I just wanted Shudder to get the views. And then I also bought the Blu-ray and the VHS. So I'm like, all right, I've supported this movie. And I showed it at my theater. I wrote about it for my friend's blog. I did an interview about it for a local newspaper.
And here you are picking it for the best horror movie ever made. So I think job done. So
I feel like I've given back to Skinamarink.
Yes, you are released, I think, from the pressure here. And as you say, it didn't impact it too much. The movie was a smash hit upon its most wide theatrical release in January 2023. It made over $2 million, plus a successful streaming release on Shudder. So, ultimately...
And Kyle's gotten an offer. He hasn't released the details, but he has a picture deal for his next movie.
Right.
And he's got a script written. He won't, but so it secured him funding for future projects.
There you go. He also told a funny premiere story where during the Edmonton one, the kid who plays Kevin and his brother stayed in the lobby because it's not really an age-appropriate movie and they'd rather be playing on their iPad or whatever because they're kids. But then they snuck down just in time for the face popping up at the end and they bolted back out of the room.
So good.
One thing I want to call out before we get into the plot of the movie, I think I've mentioned it before, but it's rarely been as relevant, is that I find it very interesting for a movie to sort of push the boundaries of the form. And traditionally, the expectation is that movies are made for the theater, which is very much still successful in the theater experience. It's creepy. You feel dozens of other people also being freaked out around you. The amazing sound and theoretically calibrated projection all adds to it. But in the 2020s, especially with COVID forcing a shakeup and the growing three-way gulf between what gets studio funding, the lower-than-ever access barrier to high-grade equipment, and how low-budget indies attempt to break through the noise, there are movies like Host and Skinamarink that challenge this. Because Host is designed to mimic the UX of a computer, it works great watching it on one. It feels more personal and empathetic. And I think that Skinamarink does the same thing with your living room television. It takes place around one. The feeling of being trapped with a malevolent spirit in a home can only be more impactful when you are literally in their shoes. I'm at home. I'm watching TV. This could be me. And so I think in that way, it is playing with the viewing experience in a way that challenges the tradition of theater is the best place to see it.
The first time I watched it was at home. First 3 times I watched it were at home. And then I saw it in theaters. I've seen it in theaters twice now, because I also watched it when we showed it at the Balboa. I think the best way to watch Skinamarink is alone late at night, at home. I think that is the most effective and psychological way to experience it. It was amazing in theaters. I was really nervous. I'm a huge movie theater guy. I love theaters. I hate crowds. I think a bad crowd can really fuck up something, especially an experimental movie. Like some dumbass bullshit is fine with any crowd. But seeing a really slow, tonal, atmospheric movie with a rough crowd can be awful.
Absolutely. That and some repertory screenings can really get fucked up by a bad crowd.
Yeah. Seeing Skinamarink in theaters was good. It was a good crowd, and when it ended, it took a long time for the lights to come back up, and everyone just sat in silence and like just filed out. Nobody said anything. But it played at the Alamo. I didn't see it there. I fucking hate the Alamo. And the whole deal where there's like waiters walking in front, talking to people, whispering, dropping check, like that is the most wrong way to watch it. Yeah. I think that is the most like incorrect way to. And my friend worked at a theater, not the Alamo, but he worked at a theater like that, and he was like, Skinamarink sucked. Everyone hated it. I'm like, yeah, because you fucked it up.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the way you're supposed to see it. That's not the way an experiential art experience is meant to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that this is pushing the boundaries of film in a really interesting way. And who knows, we might be on the precipice of something really interesting. So, well,
I think Skinamarink invented a new type of filmmaking, and I've been happy to say I feel like a lot, not because of Skinamarink, but I feel like in the last year, 2 years, there have been a lot of movies that I'm like, oh, this is completely different. I felt the same way about Hundreds of Beavers. Yeah. I'm like, there are people inventing new language for film right now. And that's really nice.
Definitely. And even though it wasn't a movie that I connected with, I think that We're All Going to the World's Fair does something kind of similar. I wound up loving I Saw the TV Glow, which was the follow-up.
Which I might go see tonight. I love World's Fair. I think World's Fair is incredible, but I haven't seen TV Glow yet.
Well, I with World's Fair, I was like, I recognize that there is artistic value here. It is not connecting with me personally. I don't enjoy the movie, but I respect this artist behind it. And so I was still very much excited to see I Saw the TV Glow. Loved it when I saw it in the like Philadelphia Spring Film Festival. And so I'm actually going again on Sunday to see it for a second time, which I am sure will be very, very fruitful, as a lot of these movies do tend to be good repeats.
I think I'm going to see it tonight. So funny, World's Fair was my favorite movie of 2022 until I saw Skinamarink.
There you go.
And I feel like they are good companion pieces, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. One other thought from Kyle. He was asked about the mainstream success of this movie driving his next work towards narrative focus, and he said he was torn. He said, I'm asking, what if I did something a little bit less experimental? Would people still like it? Or if I kept it as experimental as Skinamarink, would people say I'm just doing the same thing over and over again? I've been overthinking things. The luxury of making Skinamarink was there was zero expectations. I was able to form it by myself in my own head, and now I have all this weird pressure. Definitely relatable and interesting. I look forward to seeing what the next thing is, but I think that definitely coming out with such a strong artistic vision at the outset can be kind of like a blessing and a curse.
I've been thinking about this a lot, because I was like, even if he never made another movie ever again, he will always have Skinamarink. Kind of like Elias Marriage made a couple mainstream movies and a few short films, but like we'll always have Begotten.
Right.
And then David Lynch is a great example where he made Eraserhead, and then he had a whole career after that, but nothing he's made after that is like Eraserhead. Everything else is different. And he's got like different modes and styles. And it's interesting that like, I mean, I'm obviously going to see anything Kyle Edward Ball makes, but I'm curious if his next movie will be liminal space analog, or if he'll just be like, I got that out of my system, I'm going in a different direction.
Yeah. Well, remains to be seen, listener. Who knows? By the time you listen to this, at some point in the future, it may be out and you can answer, but TBD for us. So let's get into the actual movie.
Yes.
It does start with this lockdown shot of the hallway as credits roll. The two children, Kaylee and Kevin, emerge playing with the recorder and a tape of Babar before looking for their dad and eventually wandering back to their respective rooms. And it's here in Kevin's room that we get my perfect tone setting shot. You already talked about how much you like that long shot. For me, the camera tilting up and we stare out of the cracked door, feeling just the threat of darkness from within the light room. It's so good, especially as we're plunged into it as we start to explore the rest of the house. It feels like leaving the safety of that room.
The way he does light and shadow is fucking masterful. The way you see, there's a part where you see the ceiling and you see a lamp go out and a door open, and just we're told this just by the lights. The opening 10 minutes are so fascinating because you know the premise going in, or you have an idea, but you can't tell when it starts. You can't tell when you're there,
right?
You know, and you're like, oh, are we in the real world or are we in Skinamarink? And you also can't tell until the second or third time whose POV we're in. Kevin falls down the stairs. The dad rushes him outside. We're watching the TV. And then it wasn't until the third time I'm like, oh, this is Kaylee's perspective. Like, Kevin's at the hospital. This is from Kaylee's perspective.
Right.
There's also an interesting thing. The first line of the movie is, the first spoken line is, "Are you hiding?"
Right.
And it's something that Kevin comes out and he stands at the top of the stairs and he says that. Who is he saying that to? I think that the Skinamarink has been around much longer than we're aware of. And that he knows it's there and that's who he's talking to. And then maybe that's who pushes him down the stairs.
Definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially based on how nervous he seems. He's hanging out by the nightlight. He went to go grab a blanket for security. And before even that, I should say that the little bit of light coming from the TV, which is also playing, is, as you alluded to earlier, the majority of the lighting in this movie.
Yeah.
It mostly comes just from that actual source.
And then when we're in Kaylee's perspective, the TV turns on and then turns off, and we don't see her turn it on or off. It's unclear if that is the beginning of the first signs of, activity.
That's right. I also do like that first line in the most original form in the script was, "Are you a Power Ranger?" which is also a good question.
Wait, really? Interesting. I should read the original script. I've been because I haven't listened to the commentary or read the script or read interviews, kind of because I just want to have it on my own.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I want Skinamarink to be what it is to me. I don't want to, it's like that line from Lost Highway where he's like, I don't like cameras because I want to remember things the way I remember them.
Yeah.
But I should read the script just for details.
I will also say this closet, I find it interesting, is the only non-ADR thing in the movie. They use it twice, but yeah, this was recorded on location because of the specificity of a metal door opening that wasn't industrial. That was the only sound effect they could find, were industrial metal doors opening. So they said, we got to just use the on-location closet.
And the fact that it's his childhood home adds so much also to the psychology of the movie.
Kevin was also, his sitting at the top of the stairs is a still image because the kid was too fidgety in real life.
Yeah.
So
you can see that there's a few scenes where you can tell it's still images. And the texture changing makes it feel alive.
Definitely.
And that's something you realize the second or third time. The window blinking out is clearly just two photoshopped still images.
Yeah, and when the camera flips, so we had Kevin at the top, and the camera flips, and we're looking up from the bottom of the stairs, and it's a really great shot, but the spindles on the side of the stairs look almost like teeth as the monster starts this slow reveal process, and Kevin tumbles down the stairs after counting to 3, and as you say, there are these moments where you're not sure if it's reality or if the Skinamarink is emerging here because he could be pushed, he could have been commanded like we'll see later, he could have just fallen because children are clumsy. There are all these ambiguity points happening so early on.
Yeah, the way people interpret things too, the head trauma is obviously part of what's going on. But how much? A lot of people interpret the movie, and I guess we're in full spoilers at this point. A lot of people interpret the movie as entirely being a coma fantasy or like a brain injury fantasy,
right? Which
I don't personally go for, but obviously that is intended to be believed in the same way that in Heck, the kid is revealed to have had cancer, and we're meant to. There's an element of either two things. One, is this a coma or head injury dream? Or is he dead and this is some version of hell?
Right. Yeah, Heck.
Because
there you go.
Yeah.
Dad does leap awake. He rushes down to his sobbing child, who he drives to the hospital. I saw a lot of hate for Dad online, talking again about how people interpret this. They say it's clearly a representation of how he's abusing them. Poor guy never does anything but help in the movie.
It's fascinating. So this is another thing. So many people have different interpretations of this movie. I saw it and interpreted it. I think everybody puts their personal thing onto it. I interpreted it as childhood fear. It is just an examination of childhood fear and being awake at night and afraid of shadows. Other people, they say it's explicitly about being queer and being like a gay kid. And I'm like, all right, fascinating. A lot of people, and I've heard this multiple times, say it is explicitly about domestic abuse. And one person said in their review, they were like, the windows and doors disappearing is the most aggressive metaphor for domestic abuse I've ever seen. And I was like, I've never been in an abusive scenario, so I don't have the context for it. But it's fascinating that so many people see that it must, I mean, it's not what I think it is, but there must be something to that.
Yeah, it is interesting. There are all these moments that sort of gesture at little pieces of it, and I think it provides like a ball for people to pick up and run with, and whatever they want to sort of apply interpretations to, it sort of allows them to do it in whatever direction.
Did you ever see This House Has People in It?
No.
Okay, that's an incredible piece of liminal space horror that you should watch. But it's like 10-minute found footage movie by this guy Alan Resnick, who's a genius. But it's full of details. There's a literal story that's happening.
Oh my god, I have seen this. Oh, it's the like security footage.
Security footage
thing,
in the
right?
house.
It's I'm pretty sure it's like an Adult Swim.
Yeah. There's so many details in it that could be extrapolated into, like, Happy Birthday is spelled wrong. These books are arranged a certain, like, the thing that's playing on the TV. He put in so many details that any interpretation of it you can find evidence for. And I think Skinamarink is the same way.
Yeah.
In that opening 10 minutes, we get a lot. The mom doesn't live with them. She's somewhere else. The dad has to call her. When Kevin and Kaylee talk about mom, Kaylee says, I don't want to talk about mom. There's clearly something tragic or sad happening between the parents. Either they're getting divorced and the kids live with the dad, the mom is maybe abusive, or the dad is abusive. Completely unclear, but something is going on. The mom, as a figure, will play through the entire movie and will be brought up again.
Definitely, and I think even just to sort of really nail this point home, you say he calls the mom, but there's nothing explicitly that says that that's who he's calling. It could be like the grandparents that he's calling to be.
Oh, you're
like,
right. Yeah, we don't hear the other line.
So just another interesting point that it's like, oh, there are these breadcrumbs that let people sort of put whatever they want into it.
Mm-hmm.
But because Dad is in such a hurry to get out, the lights do stay on. We finally get a good look at the house, which is a fun delay in setting the establishment, especially since one of those lights is an ominous red. Again, sort of like, is that just normal house having a weird light, or is it a demon? And
we also get a look at all their family photos.
Right.
Which will come back later. Sorry to interrupt.
No. But the TV turns on again. There is the cartoonish music playing, though it snaps off again just as quickly when Dad gets home. As you said, we're unsure if this is Kaylee or the entity. There's no real confirmation as to when Dad checks in on her. There is, however, a quick shot of some blurry McDonald's wrappers, which Kyle joked that it was perfectly blurry enough to avoid a copyright issue.
Oh, I didn't notice that was McDonald's. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Originally, Dad was going to tell her they were out of kids' toys to imply the Happy Meal even more. Mm-hmm. I do honestly love that line as like a microcosm of the innocence and joy being taken from these kids. You know, I remember when I was that age being like, what's the fucking point if they don't have the toy?
Yeah. I remember getting Happy Meals before I would fly. Like, if we got on a plane, our parents would get us Happy Meals to distract us.
Hell yeah. Kyle does call someone, could be his mom, could be his own parent, but he tells them about the accident, saying they don't even need to do stitches. Kaylee says he was sleepwalking. I wonder why she says that.
I think he's been getting up at night and talking to or interacting with this entity to some degree for a few nights now, or even for months, years maybe. And Kaylee doesn't understand what's going on, and she interprets it as sleepwalking.
I see. That makes a lot of sense to me. But she wakes up to go to the bathroom, and on the way back, notices something strange. She goes to get her dad, but there's no response, so she goes to get Kevin instead. And we see what has perturbed her, which is a missing window. There's simply wall now, like it never existed. And the same thing when they pull the blinds on another former window spot. And I love Kevin's little, where did they go?
Where did it go? And it's so horrifying. Dude, the shot of the blinds hanging over a wall is so... And also the window blinking out. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so... And then that noise, that, like, it's like a 1950s sci-fi, like, whoa, 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 whoa. And pay attention to that noise, because that noise will signify other things later on throughout the movie. That's just such an idea. In the short film, heck, he can't... The doors and the windows are there, but he can't open them.
Right.
And I think the idea of them blinking out of existence is so much more unsettling. And it's a very childish imagination thing to happen. Mm-hmm. It's very much like a childish idea of what could happen.
Absolutely. And Dad is still missing too, and in the hunt, they find the doors are gone as well. When they try to call someone, dead line, same thing when they try calling 911 next. Originally, after the phones didn't work, the kids were going to freak out and even try, like, cutting at the wall with the knife that comes into play later. But they changed their mind, and I think that that was the right move. The fact that
Absolutely
they're still home, plus have each other, even if things are strange, I think gives enough security to not melt down like that right away.
It's also, the other thing that's interesting about the movie is the movie is not about how these kids survive or escape. It's about how they keep themselves occupied. Mm-hmm. It's about how they pass the time and how they entertain themselves in this Skinamarink world. So now we are fully in the world. We're fully there.
Yeah.
Once the doors and windows are gone.
At Kevin's request, they do sleep downstairs that night, playing a tape of cartoons to fend off the terror of silence and darkness. Although I thought it was funny that Kevin is like, okay, but we do need to turn off the lights, Kaylee.
Yeah.
I can't sleep with the lights on.
And then they're like, I think we're supposed to go to sleep. And then they're like, I think we're supposed to wake up.
Yeah.
The idea of how much time is passing.
That's right. Yeah, she just has to guess. I think it's time to get up. But I also love the little moment where they huddle together under their blankets and Kaylee just whispers, Kevin, love you. And he goes, love you too.
It's so heartbreaking, man. They're such innocent little kids.
Yeah, knowing what's coming, you really feel it in that moment. Appropriately, somewhere in Dreamland is the cartoon playing now as the kids wake up in this dream or nightmare situation. The first morning they grab cereal. One thing I really like from Heck that was lost for this is the little boy falling trying to get the cereal. I really feel like that cements the helplessness that, like, he can't feed himself. He can't get up at the cereal. That might be, you know, I understand why it's not in this. It might be a little hat on a hat kind of situation here, but I did like it in the short, at least.
I think Heck is almost more aggressive than Skinamarink. It's actually a lot more aggressive. And we talk about that. It's one specific detail is much more aggressive. But Heck is almost like even more disturbing in the implications and what's happening. And then Skinamarink kind of tones it down and goes a little bit more subtle.
Right.
And they're both amazing. And they're it's not like one exists and the other doesn't. Like, they're both fantastic and worth watching for that reason.
Absolutely. Kaylee does venture upstairs to get some stuff. I love her looking at the nightlight, which has somehow become removed. Because she also lingers on the outlets, though, which look like two little shocked faces, it almost feels like a micro-representation of the kids.
Whoa. All right. I didn't think of that. That's cool.
She looks for Dad one more time in the dark rooms, replaces the nightlight, and heads back down, but the nightlight extinguishes itself again, and when they flip the switch a bunch of times trying to turn it back on, it won't. And I'll See You Somewhere in Dreamland rings out as they stare into the dark and quietly ask, why is Mom crying? And you just go, fucking woof.
That's the shit where it's like, there's so much implied and you don't understand. So Dad is gone. Mom is there? Or are they hearing her? Is she on the phone? And that's when Kaylee says, I don't want to talk about Mom. Something traumatic has happened with their mother. Or their mother is a generally abusive, traumatic figure in their lives.
Right, yeah, it becomes difficult to parse exactly who is around if the entity is, like, manipulating the kids by pretending to be the parents, by recreating the sounds of them.
I think it's funny because I thought this was obvious, but I have a friend on Twitter who had a completely different take. I thought that the mom or the dad, every time we see them from that moment on, they are an imitation that the entity is doing. But he thought, his interpretation was that the parents are in their own Skinamarink. They're in their own version of the house, and occasionally they cross over. And the mom is crying because she's seeing her kids being taken from her. Or the scene in the bedroom is the mom and dad saying goodbye and being able to see their children one final time before being taken away. Something to think about. I don't know.
Definitely. No, and again, that sort of no concrete answer in either direction is what's so great about this. There's a time jump and some banging, and when the kids go to investigate, they find a chair and a lamp on the ceiling, and Kaylee is just like, we should be quiet. That's their answer, is let's just be quiet. Kevin is wondering why nobody has come yet and where Dad is. She doesn't have any answers for him. She says maybe he went with Mom. And this is,
where did Mom go?
Right. You go, where did Mom go? Is she gone or is she gone? especially considering their reaction of not wanting to talk about her. It's just such a gut punch of like, what the fuck is happening?
And I've watched the movie 5 or 6 times now. I have an idea for so many aspects of it. I still don't know. I still don't have an idea of what this is.
Yeah, I literally on Instagram last night was like, hey, everyone out there who is following this page, what do you think is going on with the mom?
I saw you post that. Did you get any good answers?
A few people who kind of just echoed some of the more popular theories, I guess. No slam on them, but, you know, I don't know that I got anything that was outside of what I had considered.
Sure.
But that night, Kevin says, Kaylee, you have to come see this. And it turns out the damn turlet is gone.
Which is so cruel. That's where it's like, this thing is truly sadistic and it's trying to like humiliate and embarrass. Well, it's playing with the children.
Yeah.
Like they're Legos, you know?
Exactly. Where did it go, he asks. And they head upstairs for Kevin to use the master bath, which is where Kaylee sees a bunch of toys in her parents' room, including some floating Barbies. Suddenly, Kevin says her name and she yelps, dropping the flashlight, which again is the first of these little jump scares. Make sure you're awake, even also, you know, keep you juiced. But Kevin says he got scared and couldn't go, so they throw a couple buckets in the downstairs bath. He says gross, and you laugh, and it's such a powerful moment to like hang on to. Is this one moment of levity in this movie?
See, I never found it funny. I found it really upsetting. Like
it is that too, I remember, for sure.
Yeah, because I remember saying to somebody like, Skinamarink is a movie with no comic relief, and I think like certain horror movies would suffer from like they're supposed to be overbearing. But I guess that could be interpreted as funny. I interpreted it as horrible. I
think the only funny part about it is literally just his gross. Like the fact childish that he is delivery. Like just a little kid reacting to it. The thing that's prompting this reaction is of course horrific and, as you say, humiliating, which is part of what makes that sort of very grounded reaction to it of just like, oh gross, I gotta poop in a bucket is hey, that's what my cat says every damn day, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
I also like the casual way that he asks, did you see anything weird upstairs? Though she doesn't give Kevin an example. Instead, they just quietly play with their Lego. This is also our first glimpse of the famously temporally inaccurate orange Lego brick separator here.
Right, which, like, is funny that was controversial.
Kyle seemed to take it in stride. He was laughing a lot about it in the commentary.
Because that came out in like 97 or something like that.
Right, yeah, just a few years past.
A couple years off. When the toilets appear, we hear the woo noise, which will be our indication for the entity changing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're about 39 minutes in, which is where we hear the entity's voice for the first time. And it tells Kaylee to come upstairs. This is just Kyle's voice through 2 processors. They made his voice sound like a woman and then back to a man.
It's really effective and terrifying.
Again, this sort of plays with the idea that the entity could be an abusive father. It could be an abusive mother. It has these non-binary elements to it that sort of let you apply whatever you want to it.
So this is about to be... there are multiple parts that I will say are my favorite scene, but I think the parents' bedroom is my actual favorite scene.
It's the part where, up, dude.
The first time I watched the movie, I was like, okay, all right. And then when she goes in the parents' bedroom, I was literally like this. I was like, I couldn't fucking take it. It is maybe the scariest scene in film.
It's really upsetting. It is very much inspired by the room 237 scene of The Shining as she slowly enters the bedroom. And it's so dark that you might not notice at first. The dad is there, and he's sitting still, and he whispers, look under the bed, and Kaylee does but doesn't see anything, and she says as much to him, and he doesn't respond. So when she looks again and returns once more, the dad is gone, and mom is on the other side of the bed, also sitting there scarily. And my heart fucking leapt into my throat when she just says Kaylee without turning around.
It's so fucked up. And it's another thing where somebody had a post where they were like, this would have made Skinamarink better, and they drew like a monster face in the hallway or whatever. And I'm like, fuck off. The fact that it is just darkness and it is familiar figures, a mom and a dad in a dark bed, like that is so much fucking scarier than any serial killer or monster could ever be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so fascinating that this feels like a trap, despite the fact that, as I'll mention very, very shortly, nothing the mom says is threatening, and in fact is very pleasant and nice.
Yeah, she says, "We love you and your brother very much." There's one part that really implies a lot where she says, "Your father," and then gets cut off by a loud noise. And we'll never know what she was going to say.
Right. Well, yeah, she says your father and me, and then there's the thud. And it's like,
are
they saying, we're going to be separating? She says, we still love you and Kevin very much. That could be the follow-up to the line, but it could be its own initial thought. It's really, really great. There's also a great subtitle trick where she says, I need you, and then there's a pause, and there's a pause in the subtitles before the rest of the sentence appears where she says, to close your eyes, please.
Right, which is something that similar to something that the entity will say multiple times. The way the scene ends is her voice starts to double over with the entity's voice.
Right, she's vanished. The mom is gone when she opens her eyes again.
Yeah, she closes her eyes and opens them, the mom's gone, and her voice and the entity's voice overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more of the implication that the mom is the entity, or the entity is mimicking and creating. Somehow the mom and the entity are connected.
Yeah.
Was it really her parents, or was it an illusion?
Who knows? And it's done through audio in this really awesome way. It's so like one-dimensional in a great way. There's the scratch of the chair being placed, and the soft sob, and the creak of the mom stepping up on the chair. And she says, there's someone there. And Kaylee, though as you say, they're both echoes of the one that beckoned her upstairs. The only thing that doesn't echo is, go back downstairs, okay? Right before the snapping bone of her neck as she hangs herself, though it doesn't seem to go perfectly, and suddenly a goddamn hand pops out from the dark. It's just a split second because there's a screech and a tone before we're suddenly back downstairs, but a dark hand does just pop out of this this doorway, and you go back, you watch it like 3 times because you don't believe that you saw it at first. But yeah, in the commentary he was like, look, there it is. It's just fucking scary.
Dude, that scene is that's just peak filmmaking. I can't even dissect it. It's just perfect. It is a perfect 5 minutes of film.
Yeah.
Watching that again in theater, like, because I showed it at the Balboa and I was so stoked. I made a flyer, I promoted it, blah, blah, and all these people came, and then I went and I introed it, and then I sat in the back and watched. I came in and out, but I watched most of it, and I was like, that scene came on again, and I was like, I can't handle this. Like, I truly can't handle it. Like, it's the only film that I know of that is actually, maybe not the only, but one of the only films that is actually like uncomfortably tough to sit through.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And it's shocking how suddenly we're back downstairs as well. It almost feels like did we actually just see that? Did we hear it? Was it all an illusion? And Kaylee does make it back. She was supposed to hug Kevin, but on the day, they just looked at each other and were like, I ain't hugging. And they shook their head. And basically the filmmakers had to just shrug and say, all right, no hug. And this is where the spider is tangling up Bimbo in his web on the old TV there, and it's easy to see the children as caught in a web as well. Kaylee says, help me move the couch, setting up a barricade to the room. Another very sweet moment as Kevin can tell that she's upset and goes to get her some juice. But yeah, she doesn't talk about what happened when he asks if she saw anything.
The kids being sweet to each other is another part that makes it really devastating.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They're still like sweet kids who, love each other and are innocent, even with everything.
Yeah, it definitely is one of the differences from Heck to this that I feel like is such a huge, impactful move, is just giving them an anchor that pulling it away is that much more painful. Yeah.
In Heck, it's the kid and his mom, and the mom is distant or abusive or not loving to some degree. And the kid is isolated even from his mother. Right. Whereas Kevin and Kaylee clearly are supportive of each other. Right,
exactly. That night, though, the voice calls Kaylee again, and after a little jump, we hear Kevin calling her name now. You go, where the heck did she go? And he's like, hello?
The entity is a child to some degree.
Right.
The entity is, much like Kevin is a kid playing with Legos, the entity is a child version of whatever it is, and Kevin and Kaylee are his Legos. And much like Legos, we'll see that he takes them apart and puts them back together.
Yep, exactly. Kevin does put on some cartoons for comfort. He falls asleep next to the TV. A lot is discussed about the creepy toys in this. Not too many people mention this freaky little backlit clown Duplo that's smirking from the top of the tower there. That's the one that freaks me out.
I gotta look that back up. I don't think I remember that.
Yeah, he's a little freaky little clown there. But the toys begin to move, seemingly on their own, and there's an amazing shot where it's all stuck to the wall.
That's one of my favorite things. The teddy bear disappears, and he, like, looks over, and there's just... At first it was a chair, a lamp, a Barbie, and now it's like the entire wall is covered in toys.
Yeah, it's awesome. And the strange voice calls for Kevin now, saying, "Come to the basement," and he hears the muffled voice of Kaylee calling his name as well. And she says, "I'm scared. I feel strange." And this is when we're treated to a jump scare that it gave me such a start, I can't even begin to communicate it to people. We see Kaylee sitting there, but with her face sealed up, mouth and eyes both completely removed, as a deafening tone screams in her stead. Harlan Ellison Core, I believe this is called.
And the way it is delivered, the cutting of it, is so... It's really, like, I've watched this scene so many times, and I'm like, the craftsmanship of this delivery is flawless. We POV down the stairs, and it's very handheld, languid, moving slowly. We see Kaylee from, like, chin down in a static shot. We see her face, and then quick cut in closer, and the cut in coincides with the loud blare, and it is like... It's not just a jump scare. It's like a triple jump scare. It's like it like folds on itself. It's really effective and horrible.
Yeah, it really, really is. And Kevin dashes upstairs. He sees the stuff on the wall still there that confirms it's not a dream. On the TV, Bimbo tries to open door after door, but he also can't get out of this situation that he's in. And the voice calls Kevin again and says, "Sleep," which he does with such immediacy that the juice that he grabbed simply falls to the floor as he does. And this is such, I think, a powerful moment where, you know, we've talked about how we were with Kaylee's POV for so long, but now having this removed and joining Kevin's perspective, it feels like we've suddenly lost a limb. You know, the same way that Kevin feels like he's now suddenly missing Kaylee. The fact that we're alone with just Kevin now is terrifying.
And Kaylee's fate remains a mystery for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
We see her with her face sealed off, but then is she still in the basement? Is she gone completely? There's another part where somebody shows up that I always thought was Kaylee, but it could be somebody else.
Yeah.
And then when Kevin's on the phone, he says, "I'm alone." Anyway, we'll get around to all that.
Yeah.
But again, where's Kaylee?
The cartoon pauses, then starts to loop, which is also freaky fun and also very childlike. I talked on the show Soundtracker about The Lion King and how I had to get 3 copies of it since parts of them kept wearing out because I would just rewind and rewatch the same piece of it. You also get sort of Bugs Bunny on screen for the short Presto Changeo, where he vanishes over and over again thanks to the loop. It's really, really fun to see this. This is just a great selection of old cartoons.
This sequence is so important to establishing what's happening. The first off, the sounds. It's 2 things. It is disappearing. The rabbit is disappearing, snapping out of existence. Something that will be a major theme of the movie. It is also the entity doing this. The entity is fast forwarding, rewinding, pressing play. Fast forwarding, rewinding, pressing play. It's as if he's discovering something that he can do. Mm-hmm. He can rewind, he can press play. He can make something disappear, he can make it come back. This will pay off in such a fucking amazing way near the end of the movie.
Absolutely. Although right away he demonstrates this by vanishing the plushie of the lake monster Ogopogo. So and he says to Kevin, this is where he says, "I want to play." and then he repeats it insistently before commanding Kevin to put the knife in his eye, which he quickly does before quite reasonably crying, a spray of blood now on the cabinets. Hearing the utility knife click before you see this quick moment of him stabbing himself is awful.
When I watched this movie alone the very first time, because there's so much silence, like when you say it, it sounds like, oh, and then he says this, and there's so much silence and stillness between every moment. So there's like minutes of silence. Kevin sits at the top of it's the famous image from the cover and the poster, Kevin sitting at the top of the stairs. And then we hear, put the knife in your eye. And I remember going, no! Like, I literally, like, screamed in the theater. And then he fucking does it. And it's like, it's this fucking 4-year-old kid is being commanded to mutilate him. Oh, it's really horrible.
It really is. It's awful. And sometime later, after some shots of family photos and some clattering toys, we see someone sitting in front of the blank TV. It does seem to maybe be Kaylee, though she vanishes again with the ominous tone, and there's the sound of the phone off the hook. And now that the sound is there again, Kevin thinks, aha, now is my chance, and he calls 911.
This is another scene that I have had. Every time I watch the movie, I think differently about this part. Mm-hmm. But go on.
Yeah, it definitely lends itself to that. He says, I hurt myself, I got cut with a knife, and now I feel sick. It's really sad stuff, especially the pause before responding no to, is there anyone in the house with you?
Right, so Kaylee's gone, I guess.
Yeah. Also, when they say, can you tell me why you're whispering? And it's like, well, I'm not quite sure. Like, should I be whispering? Like, it's so, he's just so off balance and young and doesn't know what to do. Like, it's awful.
That part is so devastating. And the way the dispatcher's like, oh, sweetheart, you're going to be okay. Can you stay with me? So the first time I watched it, I thought that the dispatcher was the creature fucking with him. Mm-hmm. I now no longer think that. I think that the creature made a mistake and left a window open, essentially. I think that phone call was real, and that was the real police that he was talking to.
Interesting.
There's a moment so I earlier said there's one flaw in the film. There's a typo in the subtitles where she says the doors are gone, or door apostrophe S, but there's no apostrophe. Only flaw. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, I've watched it so many times that I've noticed that. Point is, he says, I cut myself and I feel sick, which is really upsetting. And then he's talking to her. We hear the wah, 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 wah noise again, which is the noise of the entity changing something. When we hear that noise, the phone call ends. We then get a shot of the Fisher-Price toy telephone.
There he is.
Which I keep next to my desk at all times, which is the first time we see this. I didn't realize till like the third time I saw this, the entity is turning the real phone into this toy phone during the phone call. He's cutting off the phone call by transforming it into a toy. At which point Kevin says, you did that, because he's realizing the extent of the entity's powers.
Very interesting. Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. And the timeline of it does add up, because he stops talking and the phone drops, and we then see the Fisher-Price toy phone with the phone off the hook in the same way that the phone that Kevin was using would now be off the hook. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I thought that it was just like the entity like fucking with Kevin again, that this was just more play, and he said, here's a little hope.
Either. Yeah, it still could be, because so what you just said is what I thought the first like 3 times, and then now I'm starting to think the other thing, but it could, next time I watch it, who knows? Yeah. I'll feel the other way about it.
Well, I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, so that may be my interpretation going forward as well. Mm-hmm. But whatever the answer, the entity laughs at Kevin's accusation that they did it, saying, I can do anything. Kaylee didn't do as she was told. She said she wanted her mom and dad, so I took her mouth away.
Jesus Christ, dude. The I can do anything is so brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And it commands Kevin, come upstairs. Amazing ceiling shot in the hallway. Literally, they just flipped the camera and held it up. But it fucking works, baby. Simplicity is best.
The entity is now warping the geography around them. Kevin's walking on the ceiling now. I think this is also the part where the white noise overtakes the rest of the sound. It's like the entity is fucking with the film that you're watching
right.
as well.
It breaks down the walls of the house and the walls of the film in a really interesting way. The audio from Jack Frost getting louder and louder as well as he enters this hallway. He finds all the toys and the recorder have been assembled on the roof there, and the title 572 Days appears.
Amazing. That's so... I can't choose. That's my favorite moment in the movie. I can't choose. When it's the upside down toys in the house, which is obviously a microcosm of their house, sitting there in the darkness, they've been in this for well over a year. And the I don't have to worry, I don't have to care, my coat is very shiny, I'm a fluffy grizzly bear, or however that song goes. That plays, then we hear rewind, plays again. Rewind, plays again. And it zooms out, and the hallway goes on infinitely as the music becomes the song gets more and more distorted. It's like a 3 or 4 minutes single shot, or it's a fake shot, like composite shot. It is so that moment is the greatest liminal space horror that has ever been created.
It's great.
I think did you ever read House of Leaves?
Oh yeah, I have a tattoo for it.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So this is obviously some House of Leaves inspiration, but I think it's even more effective than House of Leaves, in my opinion. And House of Leaves is like maybe my favorite book ever. So, but it's the 5.5 minute hallway.
Yeah.
It's just, and the title, when you're like, oh, this has not been 2 or 3 days. This has been a year.
Yeah, a year and a half. Yeah, literally over that.
And these kids aren't growing up. They're not, we assume, they're the same age. They're not eating. They're not going outside. Like, they are just in this mysterious, this bastardization of their precious home for this long.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the way that Heck is more brutal is that in Heck, I don't remember, it says sleeps, not days. And I don't remember what the exact number is, but I did the math, and it's like 50 years.
Oh, boy.
And it's like the kid is still a little kid. Like, the creature is preventing him from aging.
Yeah. It is really tough. It looks great, though. I mean, it's basically a matte painting of the upside-down hallway with all the toys, and the walls are, like, keyed out, and it keeps expanding outward into the void in this very scary way. It just looks sick. And after the flashlight clicks off, we're back in the parents' room with the mom sitting on the bed where we saw Dad earlier.
Okay, so you think that's the mom?
Yeah, he says it's the mom.
He does. Okay, I thought that was Kaylee the first time I watched it.
Oh, okay.
But now it makes more sense that it's the mom.
Yeah.
This is another incredible moment. Is this before or after we see the family photos?
It is before the family photos, yeah.
Okay, so this will be cemented with the photos. The fucking Bugs Bunny zapping out of existence in the cartoon. We then watch the mom limb by limb, body part by body part, until she's just a floating head, which then disappears itself. We watch her fade out of reality. And this is a thing where it's like this family has been taken into this alternate realm, this demon world, and they are fully, it's like the dissolving photos in Back to the Future. They are fully faded from reality. They no longer exist.
Yeah. And I think that one of the sort of less commented upon moments in this scene is that the room is impossibly tall. It is digitally made and expanded, and it is really uncomfortable in a way that, like, you don't even necessarily notice at first. It is a room that just does not exist as we know it, and she vanishes so slowly that you almost don't even realize it's happening at first. With the tipped over lamp, one of the only indicators of the chaos that's taken place over the last year and a half. It's just deeply upsetting.
The too high walls is such a great subtle moment. There's another part later on, and throughout the film there are moments where it's like the house is changing just slightly in ways that make it wrong. And that idea, that thing of familiarity being just wrong slightly, the house is wrong, the family's wrong, that is, and I've said this, I mean, I sound like a broken record, that is so much scarier than a fucking monster.
Absolutely.
Like, Kyler Ball understands that what's really scary is a room that's too high and a door that's too narrow. And that's great horror. And it's funny, I can show you comics that I made in 2017, 2016 where I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to do like windows and doors and just literally like the horror of a room. And he did it so much better than I could ever fucking do it.
That's funny, but I mean, that's a high bar because he really fucking kills it here. One thing I do find interesting, I really like what you said about the entity sort of realizing and learning when they're able to vanish things. And so that sort of would be counter to this theory in a way that I'm not necessarily upset. Like, I think that it's interesting. I think that's more interesting. But some people think, once we see the mom vanish, that the dad had Kaylee look under the bed so that she didn't see him vanish and quote-unquote break the game that the entity is playing. He claims that her crying out for mom and dad is what caused the mouth removal. And so there's this idea that the parents know this is the rules, and they have to be chill because kids panic more when you panic. As anyone who's seen a child fall, they look to you to see how they should be reacting. And so for him to say, like, just don't look at me when she says close your eyes, that is the parents who might exist in their own Skinamarink or sort of nebulously fading into this one as a test for the kids, that they're working to sort of prevent the kids from failing, and ultimately they're not able to. And I think that it's really just interesting.
Do you think that going back to that bedroom scene, do you think those are the real parents?
Like you said, I go back and forth. I could watch it again tomorrow and think it is. I think ultimately, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, I think that the movie works best for me almost with the least amount of subtext. In that,
yeah, for sure.
If I am like, there is an evil entity that the parents, that it's just fucking with the kids the whole time, and that everything can just be like chalked up to this entity, like basically being a cruel motherfucker who will taunt these kids at every opportunity, who will have them mutilate themselves, who will torture them. I can't trust anything in the house, and so basically I don't.
Yeah. Then, so after the mother disappears, then we get the family photos, right?
Yes, so it's interesting because you see a few things, like it kind of goes through the house as the lights click on and off. In the living room, there's a few strange things besides the fact that we're still upside down. First of all, there was a mirror on the wall that's missing, but the shadow is still on the ceiling. The same is true for the feet on the couch. The feet of the couch. And then you look at the lamps, and it's just floating lampshades. The lamps themselves have vanished.
It's incredible. Everything is coming apart piece by piece.
Exactly. And next we get the shot of the dollhouse, which has no doors. It serves as an awesome visual indicator of the house itself, surrounded by darkness. My question is, do you think this is literally the house or just another visual stand-in?
I thought it was the movie and Kyle Edward Ball finally saying, like, you want to know? I'll fucking give it to you. This is where they are.
Yeah, the peak of reality.
The house is in blackness. It is just a house floating in a void. That's where everything is happening. You are nowhere. You are nowhere in the world. You have ceased to exist in the real world. You are just in a dark void. And we hear, because there's like, we hear the sounds of the cartoons and things coming out of the little house. Like we hear them in the distance, like they're in the house, which makes me think that it is literally the house more so.
Yeah.
That really nails it, where you're like, oh, okay. There's no fucking around. This is where we are.
Yeah, they're fucked for sure. The flashlight does keep clicking. It shows a different indiscernible part of the house each time before eventually landing on the Fisher-Price phone. You see its eyes, a luminescent white in the dark, before the flashlight reveals it in full, and terrifyingly, it rings before the lights go out once more. There's a few whispers that are all unintelligible to me, but again, these spindles look like teeth now that the house has devoured them. And this is where we get the dark outline of the door with the only 25 seconds of no audio, including being the only piece with no hiss. Kyle said he was looking to take you out of things in a way that created anticipation, a what's going on uncomfortability that varied from the other what's going on uncomfortability. And I think fucking mission accomplished. You've grown sort of acclimated to the uncomfortability of the hiss and this audio defect that when it is removed, you go, hey, I got used to that. Even the bad thing has a familiarity to it.
Yeah, even though it's horrifying, you're still used to it. It's comforting, much like faces and dialogue. He takes away something that you've grown accustomed to.
Yes, exactly. The tape recorder whirs like it did at the beginning over scary photos of children missing their faces and head, these family photos that you mentioned. And much like the repeated tape or the rabbit from Presto Changeo, the loop of the tortured child emerges, with cries from mommy and a blood spatter appearing and vanishing. And it is just so fucking terrible. You don't see it in the same way that you see the stabbed eye, but the audio that they use in this movie, again, is almost more effective to just have the sound cues of it and the blood spilling and vanishing and spilling and vanishing and spilling.
It is the fast forward, the rewind, press play, rewind. Well, first thing first, the family photos to me are one of the most underrated parts of the movie. It's something that I don't hear a lot of people talk about. I think it's amazing. We see those photos at the beginning throughout the house. It's their family. And then we see them again, and the faces are blurred out, limbs are missing, heads are missing. It's the same thing that happened to the mom. They are slowly fading from existence. They have been taken so out of the world that even the record of them existing in the world is fading away. And then we get the blood splatter, which the first time I watched it, I thought it was just an image. I'm like, oh, the entity is doing this to scare the kids. And then I'm like, oh no, that's Kevin being ripped limb from limb. That is Kevin being taken apart like a Lego and put back together.
Yeah.
He is, every night or often enough, it is not enough that he lives in this horror house full of ambiguous space and awkward darkness. He also has to be physically torn apart by this entity and put back together. Fast forwarded and rewound. Disappearing, reappearing.
It's awful. And the flashlight clicks one more time, and we approach the TV from mom and dad's room, where the voice says Kaylee, and then a child's voice asks, can we watch something happy? And we slowly zoom in on a door in oblivion, and the music from Somewhere in Dreamland slowed down plays, and it could be the door to your TV, because it fades to a blank screen, or mostly blank, as a scary featureless face emerges and says, go to sleep.
That door is way too long and thin to be a regular door. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. It's like the things are just warping slightly. So then this shot of the face, I've said this so many times during this talk, but this might be my favorite image that's ever been put to film. It's just so perfect.
I love it.
And it's so goddamn perfect. And it's clearly, again, a very simple technique. I think it is Edward Kyle Everball himself. It's a photo, features erased, placed far away, or far enough away, blurred, and filtered through the film grain. Is it the mother's face? I thought it was the first time I watched it, because she has seemingly long hair, and the voice says, go to sleep. To which Kevin replies, what's your name? But here's the thing. The last time the entity said go to sleep, Kevin dropped his juice box and went to sleep right away.
Mm-hmm.
This time the entity says go to sleep, and Kevin doesn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Is the power fading away? Is he losing his grip on the kids?
Interesting. And Kevin, in fact, asked twice for the name.
Yes, twice. What's your name? Which, somebody else pointed this out to me. In folklore and fairy tales, an entity's name is its power. Mm-hmm. Rumpelstiltskin. If you know Rumpelstiltskin's name, you can defeat it. Mm-hmm. The idea of the creature not telling him its name, or the name being something that the kids want to know, is kind of alluding to this whole Hansel and Gretel fairy tale vibe.
Yeah.
That is one interpretation of the movie.
Absolutely.
And then it's over.
And that's
over.
The end of the fucking the screen changes to a red tint very, very briefly, which I find also interesting. It might be nothing.
And it says the end.
Might literally be nothing, but there is a red tint, and the end card comes up. I love it. I think the film grain over the face is so fucking scary because, again, it sort of is warping it in a way that lets your mind play tricks on you. The face is not changing, but it looks like it is grinning and moving because of that grain. And
yeah, the fact that the end title card doesn't come up over the face, but it cuts to a red palette and then comes up, it's I can't even explain it. The style, the aesthetic choices are so perfect.
Yeah.
And we sound like, we're like hype men. We're just gushing, but it just is perfect.
It's the best horror movie ever made. I mean, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, everything about it works for me. But yeah, man, it's just what it is, dude. It's the greatest image in film history.
It's really great.
I think my first or my second, because I watched this movie 2 nights in a row, and my Letterboxd review was, I think, like, do you think Edison realized it would take 110 years for someone to make the perfect film? And I think, like, this is true. Like, when I saw this, I'm like, oh, this is what film is supposed to be. Like, this is, I mean, breaking kayfabe, this is my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah.
It was, since I was 16, my favorite movie was Mulholland Drive. And I would see other movies, I would love other movies, but I haven't been affected like this by a film since I was like 18. Where I watched Skinamarink, it consumed my brain. It was all I thought about. And I was like, after the second or third watch, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite movie.
Hell yeah.
And it's not my favorite movie to watch. I don't enjoy watching it. It's really painful to sit through.
Definitely.
Me. I mean, I do enjoy watching it, but it's also very tough.
I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Like, you would enjoy a really gnarly ambient album, but it's not fun.
Yeah. You got to put work into it, and that's rewarding.
Yeah. It just has affected me unlike anything else.
Absolutely.
But I initially thought that face was the mom or related to the mom. I think the entity and the mother are connected somehow.
I believe it. I absolutely believe it. And I think that that's a great point, or a great jumping off point for us to get into sort of the theories, which I will list off some of the popular ones. We can discuss them. I have grouped them into less subtext reliant and more subtext reliant for ease of discussion, which basically circulates around, like, is the entity something specific, or what caused this? The first in the less subtext section is that there is simply an evil entity who randomly targeted this family and uses their relationships in particular as leverage, which would sort of cover the mom and dad's popping in and out. The next idea was that we're watching playtime through the eyes of a family of dolls. That they are beat to hell, as many of us are rough on toys as kids. We see other toys scattered all over the place with no care. There is the shot of the house that definitely emphasizes it as a dollhouse, and as we say, could be the glimpse of reality, so to speak, especially based on its placement in the movie at the end. So it's possible that this is literally toys. 5
characters in search of an exit.
Right.
The Twilight Zone episode. My brother and I talked about that the second or third time we watched it, that it could be... they could be Barbies and Legos and things.
Yeah, especially because also there's that emphasis on the Barbies floating and everything, and these dolls and lots of specifically like humanoid figures, the clown Duplo and everything. So maybe. Another possibility, as we sort of talked about, is that the entity was a child or is childlike and is now taunting these real people and treating them like toys. Which, certainly seems one of the more viable options to me. Then there are the subtext interpretations, which the first is the coma one. People think that he's slowly losing his brain function. That would explain the lack of faces and the time jump. But it doesn't really have a smoking gun, in my opinion. Yes, he hits his head, but there's not really a ton of other stuff that makes me go like, whoa, he's sleeping. And it's also just kind of lame to be like, oh, it was a dream the whole time.
It was a dream. I don't subscribe to this, but I think it's interesting. The thing that people say is that when the parents show up, or when Kaylee shows up, or other things, there are people visiting him, and he's fading in and out of consciousness. And I do like that. I don't think, that's not how I see it, but I think it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, that aspect of it. But yeah, I think there are enough pieces of it that don't line up that make it more of just like a fun thing to consider as opposed to the actual answer. Which doesn't exist. There is no actual answer. So fuck me, right? Who gives a shit what I say? But the next subtext one is that dad is depressed and neglectful after mom commits suicide, and this manifests poorly for the 4-year-old and 7-year-old. The indicators of this are the quote-unquote recreation of the suicide that the mom does in the doorway, dad being missing for most of the movie as sort of an emotionally absent father, and the question, do you think dad went with mom, when they presumably fear that he's dead?
And I don't want to talk about mom. I didn't think about that. That's interesting.
The third option that sort of ties to that one is that it's more about the confusion a family might feel while trying to process a separation between their parents, with the dad getting custody, but Kevin not understanding where mom went. Kaylee is pissed. The main clue for this, in my opinion, is the language of the scene in the parents' room where the mom is talking about how they love them very much and you know, that it's very kind and feels like they're saying, like, it's not your fault that we're separating.
This is more up my alley.
Yeah.
I've thought about this second or third time I watched it. I think that's more... I don't think that's the entirety of the film, but that's definitely... I think the divorce is absolutely part of it.
Yeah, I do think that the mom being missing is pretty important to whatever is happening. I will say my problem with some of these subtext theories is that they either disregard a lot of the physical action that happens or focus on one thing and kind of just hand wave the rest. So my personal inclination towards or trends less subtextually, but I do like that in all of these theories there are pieces of it that make me go, well, it could be.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's really, really just awesome stuff that it has all these different paths that you can go down. And I've talked about this quote from David Lynch before where he talks about the thing that makes true art is that you can agree on the literal thing that you just watched, but come away with different interpretations and different things to discuss. And I find that that is absolutely the case with this movie, that it is 1,000 different theories and feelings and emotions that it can bring up. And so I think that that is a perfect way to bring us in, Harry, to the part of the episode where we sum up why this isn't just a great horror movie, but is in fact the best horror movie ever made. And I'm going to let you start.
Well, I feel like this movie was made for me. I really feel like it recreated a part of my childhood that I had forgotten about. My interpretation of it is way more literal, that it is just an exploration of being a scared kid. And when I was a kid who couldn't sleep at night, I would watch cartoons to make myself feel better. I would stare out the window and try to see the sun come up to see if the night was over. And those nights when I would be awake for 4, 5, 6 hours, lying in bed waiting to fall asleep or for the sun to come up, they felt like 437 days. It felt like an eternity of horror passing. And this movie, not only did it feel like that watching it, but for the weeks and 2 months afterwards, it brought that childhood fear back in a way that I'd completely forgotten about. Like, I had forgotten those feelings, and it brought them back. It caused my mind to recycle on itself. So not only did it affect me stronger than any other movie or horror movie I'd seen in my adult life, it also made me realize that at age 31 or 30 when I saw it, I can still be hit that hard by art. Like, I kind of thought I was like numb to everything, and I'm like, oh my God, I can still have this experience like I was, 13 seeing Blue Velvet for the first time. Like, I can still have that impact. Also, it is the perfect, most pristine version of art that I have tried to make. I have wanted to make liminal space, atmospheric horror my whole adult life as a cartoonist, and this is quite clearly the most successful version of it I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely right. And I think that what makes this the best horror movie ever made to me is that it's so successful at weaponizing the safety of family and home. These are the things that are supposed to make you feel good, that are supposed to make you feel protected. And like I talked about, this movie sort of breaking the barriers of what is the best viewing experience and making you feel like maybe watching this at home is the scariest way to do it. That's because it is, weaponizing that feeling of security. You're supposed to feel protected at home, and it really puts you into the shoes of a child who can't quite do that because the home is built for an adult. The home is built for the parents. And so when the parents are not there, it becomes a much different place. And it becomes a place of isolation and of being trapped. And I spent a lot of time at home. I was a latchkey kid for a long time. I also had insomnia for a very long time. And same, you look out the window and it feels like it's not just that the world is asleep. It's like it's gone. And it's so silent and so still out there that you become almost afraid to make a noise in your own house because it might break that spell that is keeping you there. If you're the only thing that's left, then that could change at any moment. And I think that this movie does really capture that. It does capture that feeling of isolation. And it's just so fucking scary, folks. Like, it is genuinely the way that it balances the tone and the jump scares, which is, you know, it's kind of a pejorative phrase, but it is an effective surprise. They are well done in this movie, and
it's the best jump scares ever made. And the only jump scares that I think are truly, truly artfully done.
Yeah.
And, like, deserved.
And it's not just, like, something falling. They're visually interesting as well, which I think is a huge part of it. So the movie just does so much right in terms of capturing a tone. And then the fact that it is a $15,000 budget, this micro budget thing that is someone's just artistic vision, their heart on their sleeve, then put onto a digital film.
It's really inspiring.
Is remarkable to me. I think it's such a lovely testament to the power of someone's can-do attitude and really being confident in their own vision. And I think that Kyle Edward Ball, you fucking did it, dude. Great goddamn job.
I've talked to him a few times on Twitter. He's a really nice guy, and he like has reposted my art a couple times and stuff. I made a bunch of fan art for the movie when it first came out because I couldn't get it out of my head, and he like reposted those.
Hell yeah!
But yeah, greatest horror movie ever made. Greatest movie ever made? Question in my.
Who's to say? Who's to say? So great summary. Harry, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, bro. This was great.
This was an absolute blast. Please tell the people where they can find your work, what they can look forward to, what they can buy that's already out.
Excellent. Well, on my Instagram is Harry Nordlinger. I have a distinct enough name that I can just use it for everywhere. I don't need to use it. So Harry Nordlinger on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, email, what have you. I do a series called Vacuum Decay where I try to highlight existential horror comics. I'm currently working on issue 7. The first 6 issues you can get at vacuumdecay.com, as well as Night Cruising, my liminal space highways at night comic, and Shadows Over Springfield, my horror noir interpretation of The Simpsons, which just came out about a month and a half ago. So all of that you can get on vacuumdecay.com. And you can read samples on Instagram.
Hell yeah. And if you're in Philadelphia, I know for a fact that those are both at Partners and Sons right now, which I have been very recently to pick up the new A.T. Pratt stuff as well. And I said, let me get this as well.
A.T. Pratt will be in issue 7 of Vacuum Decay.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I will be back in Philly in October for the Philly Comics Expo.
Hell yeah. So two pieces of great news dropped at the end there. Mm-hmm. Very exciting stuff. As far as my plugs, I will encourage people to check out the back catalog. There's all kinds of really great episodes about all kinds of really great movies. We have talked about Mulholland Drive. We have talked about all kinds of great atmospheric movies. We have talked about things that are kind of just on the surface what they are, little like slasher movies that we just love. You know, it's not always experimental stuff, even though we love to break that down too. So definitely go check out the back catalog. Lots of great comics artists, lots of great comedians, all kinds of really awesome people. Coming up, we have Jonathan Lamantia talking about Night of the Demon, so that'll be a really fun ep coming up. As far, I also one of our previous two of our previous guests were Lonnie Nadler and Jenna Cha, and they do this comic series called The Sickness.
Yes. That
people who are into Skinamarink, I am going to highly and heartily recommend The Sickness to you. Yeah. It does a lot of really cool sort of distortion and just off stuff that really, it's not like a one-to-one similarity, but there are a lot of pieces of it that feel kind of alike with that sort of dread. Really, really awesome stuff. Definitely encourage people to check that out. Lots of Lynchy body horror stuff as well. Like
Jenna Cha rules. She's a really great artist.
It's just great stuff. So definitely check that out. Recent episode, also episode 200 just came out with my mom because we did episode 100 with my dad. So episode 200 was my mom. Really fun ep. Check that out. That's pretty much it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.